Hi again, it's Joe. It's the second day here in the shop with repairing a lid for a light. So we just lift it off. It's all hard now. Remove the plastic. And I usually, my fingers or with some other tool, just use this piece of metal, a striker. Um, just smooth off the edges. Break off what's loose and too thin. And if you went down over the light, you could break it back, or a pair of pliers to expose more of the light. It should be very hard. Then we get rid of the sand. Of course, we want to leave our light bulb covered up. And then we take a torch and a striker, or some way to light your torch, a plumber's propane torch. Just carefully burn the hairs, the fiber. Be careful not to burn yourself. You don't have to hold it, you could put it down. It's a good idea to rub it. I did have an old sock here, but anyhow, just rub the surface. Don't get any hairs to stick out a second time. When I burn it a second time, careful not to burn your plastic. And then you're ready to put it back in place. Make sure it fits well. Over here on the eyebrow, on the cover, so you want to moisten it several times. And it's good to even moisten the back of it and the bottom. So you have a choice, at your discretion, there on the island. If this looks good, if all the fountain looks good, then you could try putting your thin plastic on it and and do the color coat. But I'm almost recommending it's better to feather it out and have a new kiss. We'll be jiggling the rocks. All that'll make sense, jiggling the rocks as we go on. So I'm gonna water over there again, where we're gonna show you how to do a little color coat on that big of an area. But of course my rock is gray. Your rock will have the finish. So I'm going to mix just this amount of pool finish that I just mixed up, with the 2 tablespoons of each color. And it's always good to keep some of the dry reserved in case you get it too soupy. So watch. I don't have my mask on today. Now normally when I put the finish on, I blow it with a hopper. I'll show you my hopper in a second. So my initial, I got it just a little bit too soupy. So I'm adding some dry. And I want to mix up that whole coffee can. Add it all. Slowly add the dry. And you want it like what I call toothpaste consistency. Maybe a little wetter. And I'll show you in a minute how it works. And again, if you're mixing more than the one coffee can, I forget how much I put in your baggie, but you can use the mixer, you can beat it with the beater, or just beat it with your hand pretty well so there's no lumps. Okay, we're going to wet the area again. And I'm shooting the water over there on the panel. Now you wait for it to absorb, to not be super wet. And I was going to mention too that you need to do this either early in the morning before the sun strikes the area where you know you can finish it, before the sun hits it, Because if you're there on the island and it's warm and windy and the wind blowing and the sun, your patching, everything we've done so far is not going to work well. You might want to set up an umbrella, do it in the evening, you're gonna so that you never have direct sun and the hot air, the wind blowing on it, because that will dry it out before it can set. So once we've done this, you'll probably want to cover it with the plastic to keep the moisture in. So this looks good. I'm just kneeling, I'm not sitting. To clean a hand off to raise up my camera. And so to start at the top, just smooth it on, and then when you get to the other finish, presuming that you feather it out a bit. It never looks too pretty doing it by hand. Like I said, I usually spray this on, but for this small of an area, it makes more sense to do it by hand rather than renting a compressor and a hopper and all that stuff. And then you'd have more overspray, you'd have more problems. To go right over the seam and right over the existing finish and just kind of feather it out. That's the best term. And if you have plastic down underneath, what falls you can collect to save, so you don't waste it or run out. And where there's the crack, the seam where the two pieces fit together, really force the material in there. And you have to do this fast before it all gets hard. So now in the front I'm going right up to the plastic on the light bulb. On the inside, I'm sorry my hands are wet, or I would move the camera to show it to you, but it's, as they say, not rocket science. And the front won't show as much. So you want it like an 1/8, 3/8, not really thick. Just a good coverage. Where you meet the, again, you might force it in the front. And then any place that looks thin, go back and put a little more. And normally when I spray it on, it's not quite that irregular. And then have your shell handy. This is where I put my shell that I sent you. And I've always found it's better to have a little bit of sacrificial fingers. One hole in the glove there. But I really enjoy throwing the shell barehanded. Start at the bottom and really just throw it as hard as you can. And you'll have big shell and little shell. Just the bottom first, and then go up. If it's over the light bulb, you can kind of push it up and throw more shell over it. And I come back and I just lightly touch. It really helps make sure you've got good adhesion of the shell. Just lightly touch. And again, if you have the plastic on the floor, like scrape up the finished material, the yellow material, before you throw the shell. That way you can reuse any shell. you think you're going to run out. So any place you can see finger marks, you can just kind of smooth them, make sure you got plenty of shell, and just feather out, make it look as good as you can. And a patch is always a patch. You'll always be able to see where the new pool finish blends with the old pool finish, but the patches still work very well, and most people wouldn't see them. So the eyebrow, the light covers, we're going to jiggle the rocks. In 15, 20, 30 minutes, I'm going to come back and carefully lift it, and just the fraction of an inch, like I'll show you now. Just it's kind of wet, too wet now, but just lift it like that and touch where your fingers were for a little more shell. So here it is, the day after we did the finish. The final step is to beat off the loose shell. This is the cover, so I take the back of a sturdy brush and really beat it hard, rub it. And then I take the brush, give it a good beating, and then lift it off. Usually you have to beat off where the material got too thin. Remove your plastic. Remove the loose shell. And the new eyebrow is complete.